already enjoying your lunches. We are delighted to be in this beautiful venue, and we are excited to hear from four of Oklahoma's most influential tribal leaders in just a few minutes. As we get started, if you would take a moment to show your appreciation for the very generous sponsors who have made this event possible. You'll see them recognized on the video screens throughout the program, but I would be remiss if I didn't thank them individually. We would like to thank our venue sponsor, Oklahoma City Community College. Isn't this a lovely facility? Thank you so much. We also want to thank our lunch sponsor, Bank of Oklahoma, Native American Financial Services. Thank you so much for your sponsorship. Our gift sponsor, Delta Dental of Oklahoma. Thank you so much. And our nation sponsor, a great supporter of journalism in Oklahoma, the Inasmuch Foundation. Thank you so much. Our sovereignty sponsors today are the Chickasaw Nation. We're delighted to have you here today. Yes, please, thank you. The Cherokee Nation, thank you. The Citizen Potawatomi Nation. The Oklahoma Education Association, thank you for being a sponsor. The Oklahoma State Medical Association, thank you. And the OU Price Executive Academy, thank you so much for your sponsorship. Again, thank you to all our sovereignty sponsors and our table sponsors. You will see them on the screens overhead and around the room. We could not have produced this event or one like it without your support. We are truly grateful. At this time, I'd like to introduce one of our board members who also happens to be the president of this institution. Dr. Matra Staley-Jones is the 11th president of Oklahoma City Community College, the 4th largest institution of higher learning in Oklahoma. With her appointment, Dr. Jones made history, becoming the first woman and first person of color to serve as president of the college, which serves more than 18,000 students. Her appointment also made Oklahoma history, as she is the first African-American female to serve as president of any institution of higher education in the state that is not a historically black college or university. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Matra Staley-Jones.
Thank you so much, Ted. Well, today is truly special. This is a pretty awesome looking crowd. Give yourselves a round of applause for making the journey to the South OKC to be with us today. Good morning, esteemed guests, our distinguished panelists. We have so many dignitaries in the room that Ted is going to do us the pleasure of introducing here in just a bit. Members of our Board of Regents, we have our chair, David Eccles, with us, and our regent, Mandy Hinkle, who is here as well. We have OCCC Foundation trustees, Myra Decker and Joyce Malden, along with our dedicated faculty, staff, and students, cherished students. Welcome, everyone. It is a pleasure to welcome each of you to Oklahoma City Community College for this significant gathering, Wisdom of the Nations. I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to Ted Struley, Executive Director of Oklahoma Watch, for the honor of hosting this event in our beautiful Visual Performing Arts Center. Ted, thank you for your leadership and the vital work that Oklahoma Watch does to shed light on the stories that shape our state. I am also privileged to recognize my fellow Oklahoma Watch board members who are with us today. I would ask that each one of them stand and that you hold your applause until all names have been called. We have our chairman, Joe Height, our vice chair, Lonnie Isabel. We have directors Gerald Adams, Susan Ellerbach, and Nathan Shirley. Thank you all for your leadership. Please help me recognize them. Today's gathering brings together distinguished tribal leaders, friends, and partners. At OCCC, our mission of student success and community enrichment aligns closely with the purpose of this luncheon, fostering vital dialogue on the issues facing Oklahoma's Native communities. We are here to listen, learn, and seek solutions together. While Ted again will deliver formal introductions today, here in a few moments, I must take a moment of personal privilege to express my heartfelt excitement and appreciation for our remarkable panelists. We have Principal Chief Jeffrey Standing Bear with the Osage Nation. We sure appreciate you. Principal Chief Chuck Hoskin Jr., the Cherokee Nation. Tribal Chairman Rocky Barrett with the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. And Governor Bill Anatoby with the Chickasaw Nation. Thank you all again for being here. Your transformational leadership and innovation has improved the lives of so many citizens of your respective nations, as well as our citizens of our great state. So we thank you and we applaud you. Oklahoma's Native nations have deeply influenced the state's culture, history, and future. Your voices, wisdom, and leadership are integral to the state and today's discussions, spanning education, healthcare, economic development, and cultural preservation, are essential to our collective progress. Together, through shared wisdom and collaboration, we can pave a stronger path forward. Oklahoma Watch's work exemplifies community, trust, and transparency, bringing to light the impact that Oklahomans have daily. This gathering reinforces the power of journalism to inform, empower, and foster deeper understanding. Let us use this time to explore how we, as tribal nations, community leaders, educational institutions, and organizations like Oklahoma Watch can address the needs of Oklahoma's Native communities, honoring their sovereignty, heritage, and resilience. I am proud that Oklahoma City Community College can be a part of this endeavor, fostering a space for dialogue, collaboration, and shared commitment. Thank you once again for being here at OCCC. May today's discussions spark new paths toward inclusion, respect, and a brighter future for all Oklahomans. Thank you and welcome again.
Thank you, Dr. Jones, for your words of welcome and for the inspiration you provide to your students, the faculty, the staff, and our community. I'll take a moment to expand a little and introduce some of our special guests today. Attorney General Gentner Drummond is here today. Thank you, General Drummond, for your service to our state. Appreciate you. Labor Commissioner Leslie Osborne is here. Leslie, it's always a pleasure to see you. District 33 Representative John Talley is here. Thank you for coming, Representative Talley. We also want to warmly welcome former Governor David Walters. David's here somewhere. There you are, David. Former Governor and First Lady Brad and Kim Henry. I just saw Brad sneak in. Thank you for being here. Former Attorney General Drew Edmondson and his wife Linda are here today. Thank you for coming. And I would be remiss if I didn't introduce our stellar Oklahoma Watch staff members. Would you all please stand for just a moment and be recognized? Well, thank you, and it is now my honor to introduce today's panelists. Jeffrey Standing Bear is serving his third term as head of the executive branch, where he continues the work of protecting and enhancing the Osage culture, language, and lands. Before his election, Chief Standing Bear practiced law for 34 years, and bit of trivia here, he was a law school classmate of Drew Edmondson's. In 2017, Chief Standing Bear was recognized by Oklahoma Magazine as an Oklahoman of the Year for his leadership of the Osage Nation. Please help me welcome the Principal Chief of the Osage Nation, Jeffrey Standing Bear. Chuck Hoskin Jr. serves as the principal chief of the Cherokee Nation, the largest tribe in the United States with more than 450,000 citizens. Prior to being elected in 2019 and re-elected in 2023, he was the Cherokee Nation's Secretary of State and served as a member and deputy speaker of the Council of the Cherokee Nation. He prioritized health and wellness initiatives, including record investments in behavioral health and addiction treatment. Chief Hoskin has also expanded tribal workforce training programs, sustainable housing, protections for natural resources, and educational opportunities for Cherokees of all ages. Please welcome the Principal Chief of the Cherokee Nation, Chuck Hoskin. Rocky Barrett has been an elected official for the Citizen Potawatomi Nation since 1973, when he was first elected vice chairman. Tribal chairman since 1985, Barrett is the 8th generation of his family to serve in elected office for CPN. Under his leadership, the nation has gone from having assets totaling just $550 and less than 3 acres of land to an entity having an annual economic impact exceeding $550 million. The nation experienced an average annual growth rate of more than 15% for more than 20 consecutive years. He's a member of the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, and I can personally vouch for Chairman Barrett's consistent support of the Oklahoma Press Association and Oklahoma journalism. Please welcome the tribal chairman of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, Rocky Barrett. Bill Anatubby is the 22nd person to serve as governor of the Chickasaw Nation, a position he has held since 1987, winning 10 consecutive 4-year terms. Previously, he served 2 terms as the Chickasaw Nation's first ever lieutenant governor. He is also a U.S. Army veteran. Today, the Chickasaw Nation employs nearly 14,500 people, and tribal assets have grown 200-fold. He's a member of the Oklahoma Hall of Fame and the recipient of more awards than we can possibly enumerate. Many of us know him for his humble nature and his generosity of spirit. Please welcome the governor of the Chickasaw Nation, Bill Anatubby. Our moderator today is a good friend of Oklahoma Watch, as well as a close personal friend. Dick Pryor has more than 30 years of experience in public service media, having previously served as deputy director at OETA and was named general manager of KGOU Radio in 2016. He is a distinguished alumnus of the Gaylord College of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of Oklahoma, where he has served as an instructor of mass communication law and radio news. Pryor was inducted into the Oklahoma Journalism Hall of Fame in 2009. Please welcome Dick Pryor.
Thank you, Ted. These microphones work better when they're on. So thank you, Ted. And it's a real honor for me to be here with you today and also with our distinguished panel, our very distinguished panel. Good to have you with us at this event. We have several questions and about 45 minutes or so to get through them. So I'm going to try to keep the questions moving as quickly as I can. And I know you're all eager to hear what our distinguished panel members have to say about tribal relations in the state of Oklahoma and much more. So I'm going to start at the end. The first person on the stage today. And so for Chief Standing Bear, first question comes to you, and I want to have each of our guests answer this question, and then we'll circle back around and repeat the next question. The first question is this. On Friday, President Joe Biden issued a formal public apology to tribal nations for the federal government's Native American boarding schools. He said this apology should have been done a long time ago and will really start healing and reconciliation. What's your reaction to the president's action?
It's long overdue, and the obligation for humane treatment of us all, and especially our children, belongs to both parties and all parties. And so when President Biden is speaking for the United States, that's a pledge that an apology is going to last forever. The situation at Osage is that we issued a press release and for any counseling that may be needed, but I'm going to have to say that I have 3 great-grandparents that were at something called Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania. And there's no stories in my family about mistreatment of my great-grandparents and great-uncles and aunts. And then when we get over to a little bit later, my grandmother and great-aunts and many other ladies were very grateful for the St. Louis boarding school. So I can tell you, in my experience, I have never heard of this abuse being placed on the Osage. But we are aware that many tribes have. I know in the 1970s, early 70s, there was some of the Bureau of Indian Affairs schools were called by our activists at that time as punishment schools, reform schools. And the stories we heard coming, I'm not going to mention which schools, but here in Oklahoma, were brutal. Now, we heard that, I didn't see it, but that was something being talked about, the American Indian movement and at times like that.
Thank you. Chief Hoskin, your reaction.
Well, thank you. I thought it was a powerful moment for the country, not just Indian country, because the United States ought to be willing to collectively, at the highest office, look back at a dark chapter in history, acknowledge it, say it was wrong, and then what comes next is more important, I think, or as important as the apology. But some context and a reminder is, I think, really important, and I think that's the benefit of the President of the United States talking about this, which is we ought to talk about it. This was a period in the late 19th century into the 20th century in which the United States enacted policies and put dollars behind the removal through economic pressure or otherwise of a lot of a generation of Native peoples, young generation, for the purpose of cleansing them of their cultural lifeways. This wasn't incidental to that, it was the reason for it. It was born out of a policy that was encapsulated in a slogan, kill the Indian, save the man. I mean, this was the attitude. And what I think we ought to do as a country is acknowledge that the apology is powerful, that it should be done, and I agree with Chief, it is long overdue. But then we ought to be asking what comes next, because there was an economic and cultural consequence for this policy. So if the United States can enact policy that's designed to erode and, from their perspective, cleanse the landscape of Native culture and put dollars behind it to do it, and do it in a way that resulted in real injury to young people in the form of sometimes sexual abuse, sometimes of obviously avoidable death, and then a range of other lesser but still acts of injury. If the United States can do that, if they can summon the resources to do that, here's what they can do next. They can summon the resources and the policies to, in this century, restore all that. And it takes dollars to do it, and it takes a purposeful effort in public policy to do it. So what I think tribal leaders ought to do, and I think we're all have been talking about that in our own ways, is make sure the United States engages in a restoration, not just an apology. That's what I think ought to happen next.
Thank you. Chairman Barrett?
Well said, Chief. I really appreciate President Biden's apology, and I mirror what both of his distinguished leaders next to me had to say about it. But in a lot of ways, as the Chief Hoskins pointed out, not following up with something is about like apologizing for the Chicago fire and saying, "I'm sorry about your cow, Mrs. O'Leary." I mean, it's a little sort of missed the point. I mean, most of the tribes, in my tribe, for instance, we were relocated 4 times. We were marched 4 times in 2 generations, at least 400 miles in the wintertime with nothing more that we had left than what we could carry on our backs to a place with no assets. We had lost all of our assets and most of our possessions in the price of it, and suffering from disease and illness that claimed the lives of more than 25% of those that were relocated. When you add that to the loss of 100 million acres in the allotment period, to the loss of virtually having our children kidnapped and sent off to boarding school, to all of the things that happened to Indian tribes, what we seem to have forgotten is contemporary medicine. Post-traumatic stress syndrome and genetic post-traumatic stress syndrome is a real and studied condition, human condition. And when people talk about what's wrong with Indian country, they ought to realize that we have 4 generations that are suffering from basically post-traumatic stress syndrome. And all of the things that are manifested in that, the antisocial behavior, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, interfamily conflict, all of those things have to do with what our people went through in 4 successive generations. And unless the United States starts to recognize that they have created, by the treatment of American Indians, a medical condition that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed soon, or we're going to have another generation going through the same thing.
Thank you. Governor Anatubby, your reaction.
I appreciate the president and offering that apology. And I agree with the other panelists, obviously, that you can apologize for something, but what's important is the change that takes place. And what is it that can be done about it? And we wait to see what that may be. At the same time, we have a responsibility to help affect that change ourselves and to work with the United States to help that change take place. And we've seen a lot of change in the policies having to do with tribes over the years, and a pivotal point was in the mid-'70s when we went from termination to self-determination. And I think we just continue to build on that. Each and every administration that we've had, it's almost like a re-education to what the issues are having to do with tribes. We, as tribes, have that responsibility to educate. But there's not that institutional knowledge within the federal government. And I really believe that it was sincere, his apology. And again, what are the next steps? I'll take just a minute longer, more of a personal thing. You know, you mentioned the generational effect. It affected lives, obviously, during the time that these children were, it's almost like they were incarcerated, but they were, in fact, attending boarding schools. And they were told it was wrong for them to speak their language. They couldn't practice their traditions, and they couldn't look Indian. So they couldn't wear any of the clothing that they might wear back home. And so there was an effort to acculturate those children so that they would not carry forward They would not carry forward their nation's ways and beliefs and so forth. I've experienced something personally, not in the boarding schools, but my dad passed away when I was rather young. I was not quite 3 years old. He was a fluent speaker. In fact, he spoke 5 languages. He passed away, and I didn't have the opportunity to know him. I was like a little less than 3 years old when he passed. He had a twin sister. And so I locked into my Aunt Mattie, okay, and to experience what it was like to be Chickasaw. And she'd gone to boarding school. And I wanted to learn the language. And she said, no, I'm not going to teach you the language. I'll cause you to speak broken English. What did the people say to the kids when they were in boarding school? They would not let them speak the language. They said, it'll cause you to speak broken English. She simply told me what she was educated to believe. So that happened not only in one family. That happened to many families where the children were not taught the language. The traditions were not necessarily shared with them. All those things that make up your culture. And so they attempted to do it, and I can say they almost did. But they really didn't, because we had people that said, no, we're going to speak our language. No, we're going to practice our traditions. We're going to help our children to know what it is to be Chickasaw. So one of the challenges that we had was to recapture that. And we've been doing it. Some of you have been to our cultural center in Sulphur. But years before that, we began the process of teaching the language, teaching the history, practicing our traditions. And today, a lot of those things now have been restored. But before that, they could have gone away. Then where would we be? We are Chickasaw, and we're proud of it, and we need to know all those things about being Chickasaw, which includes the history, the language, the traditions, and to understand our culture. So yes, it was nice of him to do what he did. It's the follow-through that really what counts.
Thank you. Chief Hoskin, this question is going to come to you first. In Oklahoma, Native women are 1.6 times more likely than white women to experience severe maternal morbidity. Drug-related deaths, homicides, suicides, and accidental injury deaths are all higher among Native Americans than national averages. There are other health-related concerns as well, and I'm sure each of you are very well aware of that. So while there has been significant progress in tribal investment in healthcare, as you look at next steps, what are your priorities for addressing healthcare needs of your tribal citizens?
Well, that's an important question, and the historic context is still important, which is, tribes didn't just wake up one day with these health deficits and challenges. They're the product of, not exclusively, but in large measure, a federal Indian policy that did various things. We talked about the dispossession and the removal, and then there's economic consequences with that. There's the erosion of culture and lifeways, which has a direct bearing on health and wellness. If you strip someone largely of their culture and lifeways and their place in the world, there will be a generational, almost systemic damage to wellness. So you start out way behind the starting line, and that's where we start. And then you have the overlay of living in a rural part of the United States in which across populations and races and ethnicity, there are significant challenges. I mean, we're in a state that there's been some changes, but retreated to a large extent from rural health care and that sort of thing. And then there's been corners that have been turned, but those are also consequential to our folks because that's where they live. Now, what have we done and what are we doing? Well, first of all, we have only in the past 5 decades been able to take control of our own healthcare destiny in real policy and infrastructure funding and programmatic ways. So in 50 years, we've gone quite a ways from a time in which the United States handed down health care to Native peoples through direct services to a situation where increasingly, and it's the case in the Cherokee Nation and other tribal lands in Oklahoma, we're running the health care. Now, that didn't start 50 years ago. We've been on a path, but now we largely drive the healthcare decisions, the programs, and the placement. So you see our healthcare infrastructure in places that somebody would say, Chief Hoskin, you're never going to make a profit putting an $85 million health center with a wellness facility in Salina, Oklahoma. And I say, if you're measuring profit by the dollars, you might be right. If you're measuring it by whether people in that community have access to wellness and basic health care and prevention, then you're wrong, because the profit ought to be measured in a different way. And so you can take that example and look across our tribal lands. We're building a hospital that'll be, I think, the biggest and best in Indian country. And we're also addressing things that we're acknowledging we've not done as well as we should. And so we took on the opioid industry. We sued them for the injury that they did. We bent them to a settlement, and we're making them pay for every single penny of about $100 million in drug addiction infrastructure, clinics, and programs. And so we're, I think, putting investments in today that if you ask that question, I hope a decade from now, it'll be based on some different stats and assumptions. It'll be, we've moved the needle on some of these problematic things. There's a genetic component as well, and it's just the way humanity is. And we drew the, short straw on things like diabetes, and that's not good. And then you add a lot of other things that make that more complicated, and so there's some additional challenges. And so what I think, though, is going to happen in this state is the state is going to be a leader for centers that are world-class systems of wellness. And where are they going to be? They're going to be on tribal lands. And who's going to run them? The tribes are going to run them, because we're already moving that direction. Where is diabetes going to be cured or close to? Probably in the tribal lands within the state of Oklahoma. Where's the most progressive anti-drug efforts that you've seen, whether it's harm reduction, whether it's treatment, whether it's cutting-edge ways to reach into these rural communities? Where's that going to happen in the United States? It's going to happen in Indian country in Oklahoma, and the good news is we're going to pull the rest of the state along with us.
Chairman Barrett, what are the next steps?
Our tribe was one of those tribes that was, I won't say victimized, but what was subjected to the urban relocation program of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And the government spent a great deal of money transporting citizen Potawatomi to California and to Washington State and to Texas and to other places to get them out of what was, becoming a depressed area in our original reservation area. And so our population of 39,000, basically a third of them live in Oklahoma and 2/3 of them live outside of the state. Our Constitution is designed where we have a virtual legislature, where everywhere in the United States where there are groups of citizen Potawatomi with more than 2,000 in population in an area, that district is deemed a district, and it has representation over in a virtual legislature in our legislature. The problem is delivery of services to those people, because Indian health service facilities around the United States are primarily family medicine centers. They are places where you go for initial care and diagnosis of family medicine. But then the referrals for a CAT scan or an MRI or endocrinology or all of those things, the cardiology, all of the things that are necessary after the diagnosis by your family physician, those are not available to Indians that live outside of their designated former reservation boundary in the state of Oklahoma. So the quality of, because those hospitals and those Indian clinics in other areas are run by boards of directors that are made up of the tribes that locate in that area. And they are naturally jealous of, since Indian health is only funded at 1/3 of documented need, except for Alaska. 1/3 of documented need. And because of that underfunding, Indian tribes have become insular in the treatment of tribal members who aren't part of their nation. And so our access to care beyond initial care, or almost emergency care, our access to that is extremely limited. And what needs to happen is the tribes, and we're actually working on doing this ourselves because the United States government won't do it. We need basically an insurance policy, a health insurance policy for every member of our tribe and their families so they can be treated wherever they are for whatever ailment that comes up with them and that they come up with. And we can't depend on the Indian Health Service to do that. They don't get the funding and they won't get the funding. And those, the whole politics of funding Indian health, I won't get into that, but everyone knows about a bridge that was built to nowhere, and Alaska Natives get an inordinate amount of funding for their health services because they fly them by helicopter from wherever they are out in the wilds to the local facility. That's expensive. But if we're going to treat American Indians where they have relocated, and Chief Hoskins, you have the same situation. You have 350,000 people and 50,000 of them live in Oklahoma. So their access to health care is extremely limited outside of the state. Tribes need to do something about that, and I think the United States government needs to do something about that. Thank you.
Governor Anatabi. Next steps for health care.
I want to disagree with one thing that Chief Hoskins said. I think our health system will match up with you. I'm sure there are folks in this audience today that are educated in health some way or another. And one of the things I believe that are taught in the colleges and universities is what they call the social determinants of health. What it amounts to is you may treat an illness, but there are a lot of other pressures and a lot of other factors that cause a person to be ill or to have problems with health, whether it be mental or physical. And I think we as tribes, we have, over the years, we've done things that are intended to help a person to get an education, to maybe find housing, those things that help a person socially to have a better life. And all these things fit together, and the person's health is determined by all these other factors, not just whether you have picked up an illness or something. So we have, as a nation, we've focused on these other things as well, and know that if people have housing, they have a job, they're able to afford an education for their kids, all those things that allow us to be successful in life, that if we're able to help people to get there, then it also will affect their health. Now, that doesn't mean we don't treat people. We have a nice medical center too, Chief Hoskin. Yeah, we'll back and forth, I know, but anyway, all these things fit together to help a person have a healthy life. And so we work hard to make sure that all these things are addressed besides just one thing. And it includes mental health. Most systems, they segregate mental health from physical health. in our institution, in the Chickasaw Nation, in our medical centers, we integrate mental health and physical health. You say, how's that done? Well, and sometimes it's pretty difficult when you first start, because those people who practice medicine don't always see, they're not trained necessarily in the mental health area. So there has to be a crossover between the two. But we treat the entire person, which includes the mental and the physical. And we believe that by doing that and then helping people have a nice life, that some of these things will be dealt with that you mentioned. And we're focused on it.
I'm sure you will, each of you. Thank you. Chief Standing Bearer, for your nation, what do you see next for healthcare?
Continuing on the path we're on, because the path we're on developed when I first was elected. I saw a study by 2 PhD health professionals saying because of obesity, smoking, unemployment, alcoholism, diabetes, et cetera, the life expectancy of an Osage in our tribal capital on average was 10 years less than the life expectancy of an Osage in Tulsa, 60 miles away. And what's interesting, as you move closer to our capital and away from Tulsa, that life expectancy started dropping, and it was very well measured. So what we did was to work with the Indian Health Service, and it did not work. So we got frustrated there, and then we did what the other nations here have done, is use the self-governance powers to take over under federal law the health, and we've been working to get that under our belt to where earlier this year we opened our first we have a primary residential treatment program down in a house in a little town, and it's just nothing much. But we opened the new one this summer for what they've been talking about here, the mental health, the stress, anxiety, abuse of drugs, alcohol, the whole picture. And that's isolated out west of Pawhuska. And so we have a men's facility. They're small. We're a smaller tribe. A women's facility and a juvenile facility. Then we have worked our way through to our new clinic. It's 7 times larger than the existing clinic, which was built in 1972, and that will be completed in June of 2025. That's a $50 million project. Finding the correct people, the administrators, the health providers has been an experience, and we've been very fortunate to find some people that will move into rural Oklahoma and into these territories, but we've been fortunate on that. And then this week on the 28th, we opened a new walking trail. We've done a couple for the community, but this one has it's over a mile and a half maybe, and the other one's a mile. Has a ninja course on it. It has a handicapped station. It replaced that abandoned a lot of old railroad that used to be there. It was in a wreck, and we remediated that, and now we've turned it into something really beautiful. And so what do we do for those who don't live within our territory? That's half our people. After 1920s, a lot of people just said, we're done, we're out of here. And about half my people don't live in Oklahoma. But they vote, they're members, they want to say so, and they want a benefit. So what we've done is every Osage that is that signs up for Medicare will provide you a supplement, Medicare supplement at no cost. We'll pay over $350 a month for your Medicare supplement. There's no deductible. There's no copay. I mean, I've talked to Osages that go in for $500,000 surgery, $100,000 surgeries, and they don't pay a dime. And it's a peace of mind, too, for them. And then for those that are not Medicare age, we have a card that everybody gets, that if you ask for it, $500 a year for like a little credit card for glasses, medicines, whatever it may be. And I've asked my legislature to increase that to $1,000 a year. And that comes in very handy for people. They say, especially with children, even though each child gets their own card as well. The medical expenses are huge. That's why we need to increase it from 500 to 1,000. All this is being done, like all of our nations, in an environment where education, scholarships, health, language, culture, you name it, are in competition for a limited limited amount of funds. Just because you have a casino doesn't mean you got money just to throw away. So it has to be done according to a plan. You got to get everybody to buy into the plan, or a significant amount, and got to be able to withstand the criticisms, right? And then, look at some of these people in here. They know all about this. So you just got to keep going forward. So I think with that basic program, it's set to where if the future folks want to change it, I don't think they're going to be able to. They just need to increase it.
Thank you. I want to make a shift here, and I'll ask each of you if you could limit your responses to about 2 minutes so we could get through 3 or 4 more questions, if at all possible. Your wisdom has been very well received, and now I'm going to move to a difficult question. If you could briefly answer this one: how important is sports betting to your nation, and what should a reasonable compact look like? And Chairman Barrett, you get this question first. You're welcome.
Well, the problem is the way gaming is set up in Oklahoma. You're basically limited to having gaming within your original reservation jurisdictional boundary. And sports betting is primarily internet-based sports betting, and the bulk of it has some electronic element. The problem is that we border on one of our borders to the Seminole Nation, the other border to the Chickasaw Nation, and the other border to the unassigned lands. The problem that we have is that we can't gamble in each other's territories. So how do you stop an electronic gaming signal or a bet that's being made over the internet at your border? How does it become a bet in Shawnee, Oklahoma, and if they're betting from Ada, how do they keep collecting the money that way? So that even though there are electronic means to do basically set electronic boundaries, they aren't that close. They're not that good. They're certainly not close enough to do it within the confines of a municipality. So the whole business of sports betting being internet-based, and it's now so established as internet-based gaming that I don't think there's going to be another way to get reasonable sports betting competitively. We can put sports betting in our casinos, and we can handle it just like they do in Las Vegas. But just real truthfully, the sports betting has gotten down now. I see where the NFL had to come up with a rule yesterday, that says you can't bet on whether or not a referee's crooked. Or you can't bet seriously. And you can't bet on whether or not someone gets injured. You can't bet on whether or not, I mean, it's just, they've gotten so deep into it that on these proposition bets that there's no way it's going to not end up affecting, with that kind of money, affecting play and affecting the fairness of the competition. And I'm personally not a big fan of sports gaming. I think sports has enough trouble in this current business where a high school senior gets $1 million for his face and image and endorsements. That's crazy, and we're going to be sorry we ever did that. It's going to ruin sports. And thank you. And I personally don't want to see it be a part of Oklahoma gaming, but it's going to probably end up doing that, and we're going to do our best to compete against the Chickasaws and the Cherokees.
Well, we're going to let Governor Anatubby address that. How important do you believe sports wagering is to the Chickasaw Nation?
The headline on Oklahoma, like Chairman Barrett. It's not as important to us as a Chickasaw Nation as it is to the customer. And so what we would be doing is providing a service, because the value of it to us is much less than what most returns are. Then you have all the complications that has been discussed. It has to be right for all of us, right for the state, right for the tribes, and right for the customer. And so it's very complicated. And so that's usually how you answer a question, right? It's very complicated.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Chief Standing Bear, same question to you about sports wagering. How important?
It's important for the tribal nations to get on the same page and stick together. And so I refer to Chairman of the Oklahoma Indian Gaming Association, Matt Morgan, who's here today. We have found that once a tribal nation goes its own direction on the type of games or the vendors, that it causes problems, and it takes us a while to get back together. But this new area of gaming, it's not a new area, but here for Oklahoma, has all the pitfalls you've heard about just now and a lot more. You have the existing compacts and the effect of new relations on those. You have some tribal nations that, well, we'll just take a piece, we just won't do it and let the larger tribes do it, and so we can negotiate with them. That's been discussed. So there's a lot of discussion going on, but the bottom line is that the tribal nations need to be all together on this.
Chief Hoskin?
Well, we start from this important idea, which is under Oklahoma's Constitution and statute, there's exclusivity in gaming, and that means the exclusivity extends to sportsbook. And I'm looking to the Attorney General to nod and agree with me, but I don't want to put him on the spot. But that means we've got to work together. How important it is relative to the larger gaming enterprises we operate, and I think it's not a make or break proposition for any particular gaming enterprise or the whole of it in the state, but it would add something to it. And then I agree with Chairman Barrett that these very important questions about where does the customer engage in the gaming at the casino or within the territory matters, because all of our markets look different. I mean, Governor Anatubby's market, I think, has been described as having more millionaires per square mile than anywhere in the country. Ours is more hay bales per square mile than any. They're good markets. They're just different. But it comes down to that. But the tribes will have to get together and reach a consensus. I know I'm stating the obvious, and it will happen. I think it's inevitable.
Thank you. We have two questions left, so I'm going to try to sneak them in here. Governor Anatubby, this one's going to come to you first. And many of you were here last year at this event, and you saw 4 former governors speak. 2 of them are here today, Governor Henry, Governor Walters, good to see you both. Also, Governors Keating and Fallon were here, and they spoke about the importance of a respectful, collaborative relationship between the state and tribal nations. How would you characterize your nation's relationship with Oklahoma State government today? And if you would change it, how would you change it? And you have 1 minute.
You know, we have had and we have a good working relationship with state government in general. But we do, somebody picked up on what I meant by that. But, you know, we have had and we can always have a better one. It's going to take both parties to do it. It's going to take each one of the tribes and and the state of Oklahoma. But when you refer to the state of Oklahoma, what do you think of? Okay, we're talking about the legislature, executive, and judicial, right? Then typically within executive, there are a lot, well, you know, you have all these different agencies, and we've always have worked really well with most of those agencies in one way or another. So I characterize that as part of that relationship. Obviously, we were able to get things done together. And there are other departments, legislative. We have had a wonderful relationship with the legislative branch of government. There have been a few hiccups in the executive department.
Why don't I ask Chief Standing Bear about that?
I agree completely with Governor Anatubby, and that's what I would say.
Diplomatically done. Chief Hoskin.
Sure. Well, Governor Antubby's right. I find myself saying that a lot, by the way. But he is right that we have a relationship that can't be limited to the chief executive, who I'll comment on in a moment. But we've got other constitutional offices. We've got the legislature. I was just visiting with staff earlier to remind me about the fact that we had put millions of dollars on the table for rural water infrastructure communities the rest of the world forgot about, but we never forgot about them, and neither did the state agency in charge of that area, making sure you get dollars to communities that need them. So we work together. That doesn't grab the headlines that McGirt grabs, but for the people that live in the little community of Chewy that didn't have good water, that's more important. And it made a difference that the state and the tribes work together. So you could have lots of examples of working together. Governor Stitt and I agreed on a tobacco compact. I can tell you we're getting close on a tag compact, which means it gets a little boring when he and I are agreeing with each other. But that's good. We need boring. Boring's better. But it matters who the governor is. And you got 2 gentlemen in the room who were governor. I think Governor Walters worked on the first compact in the history of the state, and Governor Brad Henry worked on compacts. But on a bipartisan basis, every governor in my lifetime has made progress towards state-tribal relations, except for Governor Stitt. He sent us backwards. This isn't breaking news. I've said it before. Here's my concern. It's not just the damage that's been done on specific issues, McGirt, tribal gaming, which was senselessly attacked. It's what had been the opportunity cost. How many times could we have done more water system infrastructure projects for rural Oklahoma, but we didn't because of the sour relationship that starts at the top? How many times could we have made a difference in public health in this state when we went through the most consequential period of public health during the pandemic in our lifetimes? We could have done more. How much further ahead could we be on the economy right now? This state ought to be the envy of the United States because it ought to have a state government investing in the future, and it ought to be working hand in hand with tribes, 39 tribes that are all doing something good and great in a lot of different areas of public policy and investment. We ought to be so much further ahead. It matters who the governor is. It always will when it comes to state-tribal relations.
Chairman Barrett, you're up.
With all due respect, Governor Anatubby, calling our relationship with Governor Stitt a hiccup It's like calling World War II a misunderstanding.
I think that may be your headline.
And I agree 100% with Chief Hoskins that the state has missed some incredible opportunities. I mean, in this state is the largest tribally owned bank in the entire United States, $1,300,000,000 sovereign bank owned by the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. We have the largest community development financial institution in the United States, here in our state. We have financial resources generated by the tribe to go towards the business development that no other state in the union has. We have more opportunities to be generated by tribes in this state than any other state in the union. And we are not only wasting them, we are demeaning them publicly from the State House. And that's a sad state of affairs.
I've got one other question, and so this may run just a little bit over, Ted. Sorry, but I want to ask this question because we've heard there's an election next week. What would you like to see from the next president of the United States regarding U.S. policy toward Native Americans? Whoever wants to jump in first, take it away.
I'll go. Every Indian tribe in the state of Oklahoma is doing all of their development, and all of their facilities are all sitting on land held in trust by the United States on behalf of that tribe. That's the only way that we can exercise sovereign jurisdiction over our land, is under the protection of the United States with a trust status. There are two kinds of trusts, one a legal trust and an equitable trust. In a legal trust, you can alienate the property, use it for collateral, you can sell it, you can do whatever you want to as the trustee. In an equitable trust, you only have the use of that property. You can't alienate it. And if the trustee determines to discontinue your equitable trust relationship, you are out in the cold. And every one of us here have billions of dollars of assets invested on equitable trust properties. And that equitable trust relationship with the federal government begins at the White House. It is not a congressional function, it is an executive function. And we are virtually at an existential point in our existence with the pronunciations of one candidate in this election. And if you think that Andrew Jackson, who took away all of the lands and moved all the tribes west of Oklahoma, west of the Mississippi, if you think that a states' rights governor like Andrew Jackson, he didn't entirely have all the backing that one of the candidates in this election has. But we are on the precipice, and I am frightened to death about it. And we are doing everything we can to marshal our assets into situations like banking that are not subject to the division between equitable and legal trust. And that's the scariest thing about Indian country, is we are vulnerable, and we need to vote to protect our own interests, and those of the state of Oklahoma.
Thank you. Thank you. Who else has a brief thought on that?
Just very brief, you know, we made the turn between what's called termination and self-determination in the mid-'70s. I think we need to further self-determination and self-governance, and it requires the federal government to make that happen.
Thank you. Chief Standing Bearer?
Yeah, I'd agree with Governor Anatubby. Self-governance is the big issue for the Osage. We are still under the thumb of the Interior Department, especially when it comes to oil and gas, what little is left of it. They simply won't let go of control, and they're putting new regulations, and they're just driving us out of business. But the solution, like it was in health, like it was in the other programs we've taken over the last few years, is self-governance, and that's a federal law, a federal procedure that allows that to occur. But the latest move by the Bureau of Indian Affairs is that jobs, field jobs, and gaugers and all that out there in the field were not considered essential federal functions. So we said under the law they're eligible to compact and be partially funded by the feds. We take it over. Our people would be checking the oil tanks and the gas meters instead of people going out there and writing a little ticket. Trust us. This is how much we took. We need to get out there and take care of our own property, because we bought our reservation in 1872 from the Cherokees. We bought it, and it wasn't given to us. It's our property. So treat it with respect and treat us with respect. We have our own environmental departments. We have our own real estate departments. And when the Bureau of Indian Affairs or other federal agencies come in and say, oh, we're changing those job descriptions that we said 6 months ago was an essential governmental function, was not an essential governmental function, and now they're an essential governmental function, you can't control them, you can't compact them, they're gonna be federal employees still. So I ended up filing a lawsuit in District of Columbia on this, and a lot of my people are nervous because after all these over 100 and some years, our people are used to this federal supervision, they call it. And if you see that movie or book, Killer of the Flower Moon, you'll see that. You'll see Molly saying, Molly Kyle, incompetent. Well, that's a legal status. We still are in those backward days. We want to be able to do our own economic self-sufficiency. We need support. I really like USDA. They're my new federal agency to go to. But the Department of Interior and the EPA have been just strangling us, and we need the freedom to take care of our own property. So whoever is president, whoever they appoint needs to be pro-self-governance, pro-sovereignty. We know that's our property. We want to take care of our people. We want to take care of our property. And when we buy land, and the Osages bought a lot of land, we want to put it in federal legal trust. We need approvals. We need those approvals to go through so we can expand the land base, especially on lands which we once owned. Osages had all of Missouri, all of northern Arkansas, all of eastern Kansas, and all of northeast Oklahoma at one time, and we were able to control all of that. And then come 1906, allotment time, we were down to 2,229 people. So we've been going since then, and we're going to keep going. But what the federal government can do is help us. I don't mean by giving us some money so we can be dependent on the federal government again. Give us money to promote the programs that you see us talking about today.
Chief Hoskin, final brief thought on what you would like to see from the next U.S. president.
Sure. Well, whoever the next president it is has a tremendous opportunity to build on where we are, particularly tribes in Oklahoma. And there's two things they have to do. They've got to show tribes respect, and they've got to keep promises. And showing respect takes really specific forms. We're talking about an entire body of federal agencies and federal Indian policy that comes down to regulations and policies. None of those should be about us, without us, as they say. There's got to be consultation. We've got to be at the table crafting those policies. That'll make a difference actually in the lives of a lot of Oklahomans, even if they don't know that it will. And then talking about healthcare policies, I'm talking about whether and how funding comes down for infrastructure, whether it comes down for economic development in a way that changes this state. The keeping promises side is about treaty promises. We have talked about Cherokee Nation, our right to a delegate in the House of Representatives, but it also takes the form of keeping promises to funding. And I think if any federal official comes here, any federal official, a president comes here and sees what these tribes are doing on economic development and particularly on health care, they'll understand that $1 sent to tribes in Oklahoma for health care comes back many times over for this state and really the country. So there's got to be a commitment by the next president to put funding behind what is a lot of great sentiments, but there's a lot of work to do. Whoever the next president is, she's going to have a lot of work to do, is all I got to say.
Governor Anatubby, you wanted 30 more seconds. You get to follow that.
Even with Chief Hoskin here, we're thoughtful of you, Chief Hoskin. We jab at each other all the time, okay? It's not new. We still like each other, I think. What I wanted to say is I wanted to thank Oklahoma Watch for bringing this panel together. We need to be able to share with people. We do it in a lot of ways, but this is special, and I appreciate Oklahoma Watch doing that. And Ted, thank you very much, and everyone who had anything to do with it. And I appreciate my colleagues here. They're all wonderful leaders for the tribes that they represent. Thank you.
And we appreciate each of you. Thank you for being with us here today. And please, once again, let's honor our special guests and show your appreciation as they leave the stage and Ted Struley comes forward.
Well, thank you, Dick, and thank you again to our outstanding panelists. As long as you're standing, can we give them one more round of applause while they take their seats? I have 3 minutes, so I'm going to talk fast. If you were at our event last year, you heard a theme emerge. Our panelists, Governors Fallin, Henry, Keating, and Walters, all talked about the importance of collaboration with the tribal nations. And as you listened today to our esteemed panelists, you heard that theme again, collaboration and cooperation. My business has been known for nearly 2 centuries for its ungodly competitiveness, but that has changed over the past decade or so. My epiphany came about when I was having coffee one day with Kelly Fry, who was the editor of the Oklahoman at the time, and she said, you know, the days of dog-eat-dog journalism are over. The only way any of us survive is if we all help each other. She was right, and the collaborators benefit when news organizations work together, but that's not the big win. The big win is for the public that benefits from those better, deeper stories. Here's an example. Our education reporter, Jennifer Palmer, was working on a story about the misuse of GEAR funds, pandemic money that was supposed to pay for Chromebooks and whiteboards and things like that to help students stay on track during the pandemic. And she found out that a percentage of that money was getting spent on things like Christmas trees and barbecue grills and gaming consoles. Jennifer only had part of the story, and she discovered that our friends over at the Frontier had a different part of the story. And when we put those 2 pieces together, we had a complete investigative package. We were able to publish that together, and you might have heard a week or so ago about the multi-county grand jury's rather scathing report about the misuse of that public money and how that was detrimental to taxpayers. Less than a month ago, you might have caught wind of another story we did, one about the Department of Education's request for proposals for more than $3 million worth of Bibles. On that Wednesday evening, a source leaked us the request for proposals, and we suspected right away that only one Bible could satisfy all those requirements. And after, some of you read that, yes. After 3 or 4 of our reporters spent a day rather frantically investigating that, we concluded our suspicion was correct. There was only one Bible that was going to fit the bill, and that a presidential candidate would benefit financially from the purchase. You heard about that because of the cooperation of our media partners, many of whom are in the room today. Reporter Paul Monies discussed the story on News 9. Jennifer Palmer talked about it on KFOR. KGOU aired our audio piece. The Oklahoman and numerous other papers ran our story. That's why you know about it. It led to national exposure. At one point that Friday, our story was on the Oklahoman's website. There alone, it was attracting 455 page views per minute. Last count, it had been viewed on the Oklahoman site, just that one site, more than 300,000 times. NPR talked about it, NBC News took it up, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Mother Jones, the Drudge Report, Associated Press, The Guardian, dozens of others published our work or wrote their own versions based on our research, and by Saturday, Jennifer was live on MSNBC. The attention was so swift and so dramatic that OMES changed the specs of that RFP the same afternoon the story broke and made the request marginally more equitable. But that, ladies and gentlemen, that is the power of the press. Think back to the Oklahoma Watch investigations that have brought about tangible change in our state. Keaton Ross's story about state prisoners being locked in tiny shower stalls for days at a time resulted in disciplinary action and policy changes at the Department of Corrections that ensure that kind of inhumane treatment doesn't recur. We looked into why federal cases in the Western District move so much slower than most of the country and found the backlog was attributable to just 3 judges, and we were not afraid to tell you who they were. We investigated why Oklahoma City and Tulsa have 2 of the nation's highest eviction rates. And that story helped secure a $2 million grant for free legal help for people facing eviction. We exposed the details of Ryan Walters' PR contract with the help of our friends at Fox 25, and working with News 9, we explained the repercussions of the state's deal that will have utility customers paying for Winter Storm Uri for more than 2 decades. We uncovered systematic blackmailing of inmates' families, financially ruinous to many, and explained why it is so hard to stop. So you see, when we collaborate, you win. All of Oklahoma wins. But news isn't free. You knew this part was coming, right? Investigative journalism is particularly expensive because it takes so long to produce a single story. We can do the work, we can find the stories, we can hold people accountable, we can shine a very bright light on the deeds some would prefer to keep in the shadows. But we can only do it with your support. My wife, Betsy, likes to start telephone conversations not by saying hello, but by saying, "Hey, what are you doing?" She used to call me every afternoon and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I'd say, "I'm editing stories," because that's what I was doing every afternoon at that time, and it would annoy me just a little. But for the last year or so, I stopped saying that, and when she calls in the afternoon and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" I say, "I'm saving democracy." If you can help us do that, there's a QR code on your table. Scan that, fill in the blanks, or if you can help us as a corporate sponsor, please talk to me when we conclude. From now through the end of December, we're eligible for a dollar-for-dollar match from the Miami Foundation, so your donation means twice as much, and that's true even if you donate monthly. We get to count your whole year's pledge for the matching grant. Collaborate with us, share our work, expand our audience. Help us ensure that Oklahoma is a state of transparency, honesty, and integrity. Thank you for being here today, and a special thank you to our sponsors and our fantastic panelists. Please join me in one last round of applause. Thank you again for being here. Please enjoy the rest of your afternoon.